I stood in the hallway, the taste of blood sharp on my lip, as the laughter of 50 guests rolled through the clubhouse walls. Tara leaned close, her breath sticky with wine, and whispered, "Smile for the guests." Then she walked out like nothing happened. Like my son wouldn't ask if I had fallen. Like the bruises wouldn't bloom under curated lighting. But I didn't scream. I took photos, filed reports, kept every receipt. And when the lawyer read the final terms, when her name vanished from every clause, that's when I smiled. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The music floated softly through the HOA clubhouse. A background hum of jazz covers played low enough to encourage conversation, but just loud enough to bury tension. String lights twinkled above rental glassware and platters of cubed cheese, and no one noticed the way Nora Whitfield's left hand trembled as she refolded her cloth napkin for the third time. The event was typical Tara, polished, overpriced, and dripping in forced civility. A family appreciation mixer meant to impress neighbors, colleagues, and anyone who might be useful later. Jason had told Nora that showing up was important optics. And like always, she'd obliged. Quietly, neatly. But behind the catering trays and curated playlist, something darker simmered. Nora excused herself, slipping down the narrow hallway that connected the main room to the pantry. She didn't hear Tara's heels behind her until it was too late. "Smile for the guests," Tara hissed, stepping in close, her breath sharp with rosé and mint. Then her right fist came fast, tight, and deliberate. The punch landed just beneath Nora's eye, knuckle-slamming cheekbone with a sickening snap. Nora stumbled back, crashing against the metal shelf, canned sodas clattering around her. Her fingers clutched the wire rack to stay upright, but she didn't cry out. Footsteps echoed nearby. Tara adjusted her dress and leaned in close, voice now satin smooth. "Fix your face before you come back out. You're embarrassing." Then she was gone. Nora stood there, panting shallowly through the pain. Her face burned, her lip throbbed, but she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and pushed herself upright. As a couple passed the corridor laughing, she stepped out, forcing her jaw into a smile so brittle it could have cracked. She didn't meet their eyes. In the restroom, she locked the door and gripped the sink. The reflection showed everything, red swelling blooming under her left eye, lip already split in the corner. Her lipstick smeared across her chin like a slap. She reached into her purse with calculated calm and pulled out her phone. Click, click, click. 3 photos, one straight on, one from the side, one angled down, showing the curve of her collarbone and the blooming discoloration. She saved them in a new album and named it, simply, 8:14 p.m. She washed her hands, fixed her lipstick as best she could, and walked back into the crowd. The overhead lights made her eyes water, but she didn't flinch. Jason was at the front of the room, raising a glass. "Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight. Family means everything to us." The crowd clinked their glasses. Tara stood at his side, laughing too loudly. Nora took her seat beside Ava, who was staring at her with quiet, wide-eyed confusion. Nora smiled. It hurt. She did it anyway. A few minutes later, Betty Cruz slid into the chair beside her, sniffing like a nurse who'd seen everything. She leaned in close, voice low and clinical. "You're starting to swell." "Right side. Hi. It's fine," Nora whispered. "No, it's not. We're going to urgent care." Now Nora didn't argue. She never argued with Betty, not when her tone turned like that. They left quietly through the back, avoiding the clinking, curated joy. Outside, the coastal night air wrapped around them, salty and cool. The car ride started in silence, Betty gripping the wheel with one hand and texting someone with the other. The pain deepened by the minute, blooming through Nora's temple, radiating toward her ear. Her stomach churned, not from nausea, but from restraint. She tasted the faint metallic tinge of blood where her tongue had touched her lip too hard. Halfway to urgent care, the headlights blurred, and the road shimmered sideways. Nora blinked hard, shook her head. Betty, she murmured. Betty glanced over. I see it. Hold tight. Almost there. Nora leaned back against the seat, eyes unfocused, breath shallow. She'd been hit before, by fate, by grief, by silence, but never like this. Never by family, and never in full view of a house full of guests. And still, she smiled. The urgent care waiting room hummed under fluorescent lights and the low buzz of a malfunctioning vending machine. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and stale coffee. Nora sat still, clutching an ice pack to her cheekbone, while Betty paced just behind her, arms crossed, watching the clock like it owed her something. A nurse finally appeared at the doorway. Nora Whitfield. Nora stood slowly, dizziness pinching the edges of her vision. Betty followed without asking. Inside the small exam room, the doctor took one look at Nora's face and didn't bother pretending. Who did this? He asked, voice quiet but blunt, as he pulled on gloves. I hit a shelf, Nora said. In a pantry. His eyes didn't leave hers. Did the shelf hit you first? Betty cleared her throat sharply, but Nora didn't answer. The doctor exhaled, examined the swelling, and began pressing gently along the bruised cheek. Contusion, possibly a mild concussion. Lips split at the edge. When did it happen? About 2 hours ago, Nora replied. I want to get a scan just to be cautious. But first, we need to document everything, the doctor said, nodding to the nurse. Take photos. Full front, left side, right side. The nurse raised the camera gently. Do you consent, Ms. Whitfield? Nora nodded. Yes. The camera clicked 3 times, then again from a closer angle. The flash caught the wet sheen beneath her eye. As the nurse typed in her notes, she glanced back at Nora and said quietly but firmly, If someone did this to you, you need to file a police report tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. While it's fresh, Nora didn't reply, but something in her posture shifted, her spine just a bit straighter, her hands no longer wringing in her lap. They ran a quick scan, cleared her of serious injury, and gave her discharge papers with highlighted sections for follow-up care. On the way to the car, Nora's phone buzzed in her purse. Jason's name lit up the screen. Betty rolled her eyes. You don't have to answer. Nora did anyway. Hello? Jason's voice came quick, nervous. Mom, listen, I just found out about the urgent care thing. Tara told me you had a fall. She said you hit your face on some shelving. Nora said nothing. She's under a lot of stress, he continued. I know she can be sharp sometimes. But maybe we don't need to escalate this. Maybe just talk it through. She hit me, Nora said evenly. She made sure no one saw, and then she told me to smile. A pause. Jason exhaled. You're sure? Betty leaned over and muttered. Tell him to call me next time he wants stupid confirmed. I'm sure, Nora said, then ended the call without waiting for his response. Betty pulled into the police station's small side lot, threw the gear shift into park, and turned to her. You heard the nurse. I heard her. Nora walked inside, the night air cool against her skin. The station was quiet, manned by a single officer behind thick plexiglass. Nora filled out a statement slowly, deliberately, every detail from the punch to the photos to the words Tara hissed before it happened. She listed the guests she passed in the hallway. She described the angle of the shelving, the way her teeth knocked together, the smell of Tara's perfume. She wrote until her hand cramped. When she turned it in, the officer gave her a stamped receipt and a case number. Keep this, he said. We'll contact you about next steps. Outside, Betty waited on the hood of the car. That paper doesn't fix anything, she said, but it makes sure someone's watching now. Nora nodded and slid into the passenger seat. The phone buzzed just after midnight. Nora was in bed with an ice pack propped against her cheek, the bedroom dark except for the glow of her nightstand lamp. She'd barely closed her eyes when the vibration rattled the glass top again. It was a direct message. Ava. Saw this before she deleted it. Attached were 4 screenshots. Nora tapped each one slowly, her breath catching on the third. Tara's Instagram story had gone out to nearly 500 followers. A picture of the wine table with glittery filters, then a blurry photo of Nora from the back, hunched slightly, walking through the crowd. Poor Nora had one too many wine glass, fell into the pantry shelving, haha, she's okay, folks. Then the caption changed 15 minutes later, same image, new text. Wine plus wedges equals face plant. And finally, gone. But not before Ava caught it. Nora stared at the screen. She didn't cry. She didn't throw the phone. She simply tapped save on each screenshot, then moved them into a new digital folder she'd titled earlier that evening, Case Evidence. Next, she downloaded a metadata reader. It took her 2 tries, but once it opened, she ran the screenshots through. Time-stamped, geotagged. Her eyes lingered on the line of code that confirmed the file hadn't been altered. Smile for the guests, Nora whispered aloud, the word sour in her mouth. She copied the comment threads too, some laughing, a few with heart emojis, one saying classic. She saved everything, the jokes, the lies, the evidence. It was a cake frosted in cruelty, served cold. In the morning, Betty arrived with coffee in a folder. She handed over a printout. Triage notes. I pulled strings. Got you your full urgent care chart. Nora took it wordlessly, slipping it into a manila envelope with the photos and the police report. You're doing it? Betty asked. Yes. Good. You need a lawyer who loves paper as much as you do. Nora glanced up. I already booked one. Elena Park, 9 o'clock. Betty blinked. That fast? I don't wait anymore, Nora said quietly. Not for permission. Not for fairness. The office of Elena Park was on the 11th floor of a mid-rise downtown, overlooking a slice of ocean that shimmered through the smog. The waiting area was sleek but unpretentious. Glass table, fern in the corner, a plaque that read, Truth documented wins. Elena emerged in flat shoes, no makeup, and a tailored navy suit. Miss Whitfield. Inside her office, Nora laid out the photos like a dealer at a high-stakes table, swollen cheek, split lip, redness still creeping down her neck. Then the urgent care report, then the police case number. Finally, the screenshots from Ava. Elena's expression didn't change, but she nodded slowly. You're organized. That's going to save us time and money. She said I fell, Nora said, voice level. She turned it into a joke. We'll let the DA handle the criminal piece, Elena said, already pulling out her legal pad. But I want you to know, we can also go civil. Assault, battery, possibly defamation. Her post checks every box for damage. She deleted it. Doesn't matter. You saved it. You saved everything. Elena looked up. We'll go criminal first, then civil. That's how we build pressure. Nora nodded once. Good. She left the office feeling steadier. Betty met her downstairs with a bagel and a fresh coffee. What did she say? Betty asked. That I'm not imagining this. You weren't. They sat on a bench just outside the building, watching seagulls pick at something near the curb. Nora opened her phone again, ready to back up the files to a cloud account, when a new email pinged in. Subject: HOA venue footage from Tony.R@sunsetclubmgmt.com. Hi, Ms. Whitfield. FYI, one of our hallway cameras covers part of the pantry corridor. Would you like us to preserve the footage from last night? We haven't overwritten anything yet. Nora's finger hovered over the reply button, a strange mix of nausea and electricity rising in her chest. She hit YES. Please preserve and secure immediately. And for the first time since the punch, her hands stopped shaking. The camera didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't lie. It was mounted high in the ceiling corner just outside the pantry corridor, placed to monitor rental deliveries and party foot traffic. Tara must have seen it before. Everyone who walked through the clubhouse did. But maybe she thought no one would bother checking. Or maybe she just believed Nora wouldn't have the spine to dig. She miscalculated. Tony Rivera, the HOA clubhouse manager, met Nora and Elena in the small back office behind the kitchen. There was a humming air purifier in the corner, and the desk was cluttered with maintenance forms and a half-eaten muffin. But on the screen, paused mid-motion, was the grainy security footage that changed everything. "There," Tony said, tapping the space bar. "That's your timestamp." Nora watched herself walk down the hallway, steadily, with purpose. A moment later, Tara entered behind her. On screen, her movements were sharp, purposeful, too close. Tony clicked play. The screen showed Tara glancing around quickly. Then her left arm shot forward. Nora stumbled sideways, off balance, catching herself on the shelving inside the pantry entrance just before the camera view cut off. But not before it caught the shove. Not before it caught Tara's mouth moving. Tony raised the volume. "Smile for the guests," Tara's voice crackled, too crisp to ignore. Elena leaned in, pressing her lips into a flat line. "That's enough. I'll need the full clip, uncompressed. Secure chain of custody. I'll send a subpoena and a preservation letter tonight." Tony nodded, already clicking buttons. "You'll have it by end of day." By the time they returned to Elena's office, Nora was silent, not shaken, focused. "We now have corroboration," Elena said. "It's not the punch, but it proves aggression, proximity, and intent. Combined with your injuries and her online lie, this is enough to move forward." "Will they charge her?" "They'll have to consider it seriously now." "We'll forward the footage to the DO back home." Betty arrived with a clipboard and a pen. "I wrote up a sworn statement," she said. "Medical perspective. Injury pattern, timing, witness impressions." She sat across from Nora at the dining table and slid it over. "This is thorough," Nora said, reading line by line. "I worked triage for 30 years. I've seen real falls. You didn't fall, honey. You were hit." Nora signed the bottom with a steady hand. It felt less like vengeance and more like accounting. Balancing the books. Elena looped in a victim advocate later that evening. The woman, Lillian, called Nora directly. "We don't just prep you for court. We stand with you through it," she said. "I'll walk you through how to testify, how to request safety measures, and how to speak your truth without shrinking." "I've been shrinking for years," Nora replied. "I'm done." But not everyone wanted the truth to stand tall. Jason showed up the next morning unannounced, pacing on Nora's front porch. He looked exhausted, shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. "Mom," he started when she opened the door just wide enough to hear him. "Please?" "Don't do this," she didn't speak. "Tara's not well, okay?" she snapped. "But if this blows up, Ava." "Stop," Nora said. "This isn't about Ava. Don't drag her in." Jason ran a hand down his face. "You filed a report. Now you're sending lawyers after her. Can't we just make this go away quietly?" Nora stared at him, then stepped back and slowly shut the door. She didn't slam it. She didn't yell. She simply turned the deadbolt. That afternoon, Elena forwarded an email marked Priority. Subject: Case Update. People vs. Tara Whitfield. From DA Office, Long Beach County. Elena, we are officially picking up the case. Misdemeanor battery charges filed. First court date will be set shortly. Thank your client for her documentation. It made the difference. Nora exhaled slowly, the email glowing from her screen like an ember. She didn't smile, not yet. But she stood taller when she printed it out and slid it into the folder labeled Action Taken. The court clerk slid the temporary restraining order across the counter with both hands, like a document too hot to touch. "This is active the moment it's served," she said, her voice careful, neutral. Nora took it with fingers that no longer trembled. She didn't expect to feel powerful holding a stapled sheaf of paper, but there it was. Her name at the top, her rights spelled out in ink, and Tara's name printed just below like a threat being filed under containment. The courthouse air was dry, processed. Nora breathed it in like oxygen she hadn't had in years. She'll be served by noon tomorrow, Elena said, checking her phone for the process server's confirmation. I've already lined up our civil suit. We're filing for assault, battery, and defamation, plus attorney's fees. That won't shake Jason into waking up, Nora said quietly. It might not, Elena replied. But that's not the point, is it? Nora shook her head. No, it isn't. The next morning, Nora sat across from a woman named Carla Hastings, a state attorney, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, quick with a highlighter. The office smelled faintly of eucalyptus and fresh toner. Carla clicked her pen twice before speaking. You're not just planning for death, Carla said. You're protecting yourself from the living. Nora nodded. Then let's start with the exclusions. Carla raised a brow. You want to write out your son? Not Ava, Nora said. Just Jason and his wife. I want Tara explicitly excluded. And if Jason tries to route anything through her, I want the language airtight. We'll use a no contest clause, Carla replied. Strong one. If either of them tries to dispute it, they lose everything. Good. Nora slid a folder across the desk. Her living will, health proxy, financials, deeds, account statements, and a handwritten note titled, Why I Am Doing This. Carla flipped through it, impressed. You file better than my paralegal. I was a bookkeeper for 40 years, Nora said. I kept other people's lives in order. It's time I do the same for mine. By the time the documents were ready, it was late afternoon. The notary met them at Nora's house, a tall woman with no patience for small talk, and a clicking thumb that kept pace with the pen. The stamps landed loud and permanent on the bottom corner of every page. You now have a revocable trust, Carla said, closing the binder. Tara Whitfield is explicitly disinherited. Jason is excluded unless certain criteria are met. Ava will inherit a separate education trust, released in stages, college age, then young adulthood. No one else can touch it. And if they try? Nora asked. Carla smiled. We litigate. That night, Betty brought over a bottle of sparkling cider and 2 glass flutes. You made yourself unbreakable, she said, raising hers. Nora clinked her glass gently. No, just unbought the next day. The process server stood in front of Tara's house, clipboard in hand, body cam rolling. Tara opened the door, wearing yoga pants, full makeup, and the kind of artificial calm that snapped the second her name was said. Are you Tara Whitfield? I am. You've been served. He handed over the TRO. 10 pages thick, protective conditions circled. Tara didn't flinch. She glanced down at the papers, then directly into the body cam lens. Her lips curled. She smiled. Not a flash of fear, not shame, but a careful, camera-ready grin that chilled more than any slap could. And just as she began to close the door, she whispered to herself, low, almost inaudible, but the mic caught it anyway. Smile for the guests, she said again. This time, the guest was the law. The email came in bold red type across Elena's screen. Subject, response to Whitfield vs. Whitfield, defense position. Tara's attorney was every inch the stereotype. Overworded, overconfident, and soaked in condescension. He'd attached a PDF response that dripped with mockery. This entire incident appears to stem from a regrettable but non-malicious moment following celebratory alcohol consumption. Miss Whitfield's memory may not be reliable. We will be pursuing action for defamation if this continues. Elena didn't even blink. She highlighted the phrase, regrettable but non-malicious, with her mouse, copied it into a new email, and then dropped in 5 still images from the HOA hallway footage. Nora staggering against the shelf. Tara's elbow driving into her side. Nora clutching her cheek. Jason raising his glass inside the party. Ava watching, wide-eyed. She added the file from urgent care. A full medical write-up, time-stamped photos, concussion scan, physician notes. Then, with a few firm keystrokes, Elena attached a formal anti-slap warning. Any retaliatory defamation claim will trigger an immediate motion to strike under California's anti-SLAPP statute, and our office will seek full attorney's fees. Proceed accordingly." When Nora read the draft before Elena sent it, she only had one comment. "You spelled bully with a law degree." Elena smiled. "It's a dialect." That night, Nora stood at her front door with a new deadbolt in her left hand and a screwdriver in her right. The air in Long Beach was thick with salt and dusk. The old lock clinked onto the floor. She replaced it slowly, carefully, turning the screws until they bit down firm and flush. Jason had been texting all day. First, "Mom, let's talk." Then, "Please don't escalate this. You're both emotional." Then, "She's sorry, we're all under stress. Don't ruin this over a misunderstanding." Nora didn't answer. She opened her doorbell camera app instead and set it to record audio too. Every movement, every sound would now be saved in the cloud. At the kitchen table, she pulled out a slim notebook, opened to the first page, and wrote in neat cursive, "January 18th, Tara served with TRO. Jason texted 3 times. Doorbell quiet, no contact in person. Start your record early," the victim advocate had said. "You don't want to rely on memory when the nerves hit. Paper won't forget what adrenaline blurs." That same advocate now sat beside her in Elena's office 2 days later, role-playing witness prep. "Let's walk through what you'll say if Tara's attorney tries to downplay it." "I'll stick to the facts," Nora said, chin high. "What she said, what she did, and what the doctor saw. I don't need to exaggerate a punch I still feel every time I bite toast." The advocate nodded. "That's the tone. Calm is power." Just before sunset, as gulls wheeled over the shoreline and the sky tinted gold over Long Beach, Elena's phone buzzed. The DA's email header read, "Battery charges filed, misdemeanor. Arraignment date set for February 9th. Elena looked up at Nora and said, "You're not alone in this anymore. The state's stepping in. It's real now." Nora nodded once, steady. It was real the moment she told me to smile. The courtroom smelled faintly of bleach and bad coffee, like too many stories had been scrubbed from the air but still lingered in the corners. Nora sat at the plaintiff's table, spine straight, lips pressed to hide the ache still pulsing under her cheekbone. Her hand rested on a yellow legal pad. No doodles, just her name, the date, and a single word underlined twice: truth. Tara entered like it was a charity gala. Beige trench coat, high ponytail, not a wrinkle on her dress. She didn't look at Nora. Her eyes scanned the benches like a casting agent might be watching. Jason trailed behind her, his tie askew and his face a shade too pale. He took a seat in the back row, knuckles white on the wood rail. "Case number 38,427. People v. Tara Whitfield," the bailiff announced. Elena leaned into Nora and whispered, "She's going to plead not guilty." "Stay composed. This is only the arraignment." And sure enough, Tara's attorney stood and said the words like he was ordering lunch. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The judge, a woman with a sharp bob and a voice like clipped stone, nodded. Plea entered. Bail is not required at this time, but the temporary protective order remains in full effect. Defendant is not to come within 100 feet of the complainant. Nora didn't blink. "Next," the judge continued, "we'll set discovery deadlines." Elena stood, calm and surgical. "We request an expedited timeline, Your Honor. My client is 71. She's not here for delay games." The judge gave the briefest of nods. "Agreed. Trial to be scheduled within 60 days. Discovery closes in 30. In the hallway after the hearing, Betty handed Nora a thermos of weak peppermint tea. "Breathe between answers," she said softly. "No rush. You're not the one being chased, I know," Nora said. But her heart was still hammering like it hadn't gotten the memo. They walked toward the parking lot together, just past a row of dusty ficus trees in concrete planters. But before they reached the car, Jason stepped into Nora's path. "Mom," Betty bristled, "now's not the..." It's fine, Nora said quietly and turned to face her son. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept through a single night in weeks. You don't have to do this. Please? We're already humiliated. Tara's being painted like some monster. Just pull the report, say it was a misunderstanding. We'll work it out. Nora's voice was low but unshaking. She punched me in the face, Jason, in a pantry, and told me to smile. Jason opened his mouth but found nothing to say. Nora stepped around him. Betty followed, shaking her head. That night, Nora only wanted bananas and oatmeal, something soft. She drove to the grocery store with her cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders, avoiding mirrors in the cereal aisle. But as she turned the corner near produce, she nearly dropped her basket. Tara was there, not even pretending to shop, standing between avocados and the bulk bins, pretending to be surprised. "Oh," she said too brightly, "fancy seeing you here." Nora said nothing, but she stepped back and looked, slowly, deliberately, up at the corner of the ceiling where the store's camera blinked red. Tara followed her eyes, and for the briefest flicker of a second, her smile cracked. Nora turned and walked away, straight to her car. At home, she opened her doorbell app. The notification was already there. The grocery visit had triggered her proximity alert. Elena would have it by morning. The doorbell footage didn't lie. There she was, Tara Whitfield, hovering 5 feet from Nora's front porch, backlit by the porch light, arms folded like she was waiting to be invited in. And earlier that same day, the grocery store's security camera captured her trailing behind Nora's cart in 3 separate aisles, never grabbing a single item. "She followed you," Elena said, tapping the space bar to pause the playback at the exact frame where Tara stood between the baking supplies and Nora's retreating back. "This isn't a coincidence. It's an escalation." The footage files were logged, labeled, and burned to a disk. Elena submitted the violation report that afternoon, and within 48 hours, the court issued a hearing notice. Tara would have to explain, under oath, why she was suddenly appearing where she was court-ordered not to be. "She's baiting you," Betty warned, setting down a cup of cinnamon tea on Nora's kitchen table. "She's hoping you'll snap, and then you get painted as the unhinged one." "I won't," Nora said simply, opening her new spiral notebook and writing the date. January 24th, Tara within 10 feet. 2 locations, heart rate spiked, slept poorly. The hearing room was smaller than the courtroom. Intimate, which made the tension between both tables feel louder somehow. Tara wore a navy blazer, hair swept into a soft bun, trying to radiate professionalism, but her knee bounced under the table. "She was shopping," Tara's attorney said, palms open. "We live in the same city." Occasional overlap is unavoidable. The timestamps on both videos, Elena countered, voice clean and quiet, show that Ms. Whitfield entered the grocery store less than 2 minutes after my client. She made no purchases, followed her through 3 aisles, and exited immediately after her. The porch visit happened hours later. Both are within the same 24-hour period. The judge's eyes flicked down to the paperwork. "Miss Whitfield, did you follow the complainant that day?" Tara lifted her chin, breath trembling just slightly. "No, Your Honor. I had no idea she was there. I was just running errands." Elena reached forward, slid a still photo across the table. Tara's face, in full view, framed by the grocery aisle camera. "Then explain this," the judge said. Silence. The violation was sustained. Effective immediately, the protective order was tightened. Tara would wear a court-monitored GPS ankle tracker. No contact distance extended to 300 feet. Weekly compliance check-ins. Any future violations would trigger immediate detention. Nora exhaled, but didn't smile. Back at home, she pulled out her journal and added another entry. January 26th. Violation confirmed. Order extended. Heart rate finally dropped. Later that week, the DA called Elena. They'd decided to amend the criminal complaint, adding the protective order violation as a separate charge. It meant longer potential penalties if convicted. but it also opened the door to a resolution. "We're offering a deal," the DA explained. "Probation, court-ordered anger management classes, and financial restitution for medical costs. No jail, but the conviction stands." Elena relayed the message to Nora as they sat across from one another in her office. "She won't take it," Nora said, folding her hands, "because that would mean admitting she did it." Elena's phone buzzed mid-sentence. She checked the screen, her jaw tightening. "Well," she said, setting the phone down, "you're right. Her lawyer just declined the plea. We're going to trial." Nora looked out the window. Outside, kids were playing across the street. Someone yelling over a soccer ball, someone else laughing. "I didn't start this," she said, voice low, "but I'm going to finish." The courtroom lights hummed overhead, sterile and indifferent, while the projector flickered to life. Nora's face appeared first, caught in a grainy still from the HOA hallway camera. Her hand braced on the pantry shelf, her mouth slightly open. The timestamp blazed in the corner. A frame later, Tara entered the shot, moving fast. The jury leaned in. No sound played yet, but the image spoke volumes. The DA stood beside the screen, hands clasped behind her back like a lecturer unafraid of silence. Then came the audio, faint but clear. "Smile for the guests," Tara hissed. The words echoed through the courtroom like a slap. Gasps rippled through the audience bench. One juror shook her head and looked down. The footage faded into black. Then came the photographs, close-up shots of Nora's swelling cheekbone, the split in her lip, the smudged lipstick she hadn't reapplied. Elena narrated only the necessary facts, clicking through the images without embellishment. Then came the post, Tara's smiling face on Instagram, with the caption, "Sometimes wine and heels don't mix." "Glad she's okay," wink face hovered on screen like a sneer. Next, Nora took the stand. She didn't fidget, didn't sigh. She answered the prosecutor's questions in clear, steady sentences. "She cornered me in the pantry hallway. She told me to smile. Then she struck me once. Cheekbone, closed fist. I stumbled, caught the shelf. I didn't scream. I didn't fight back. I left the room, went to the bathroom, and documented the damage." "What was going through your mind at that moment?" "That no one would believe me unless I could show them, so I made sure I could." Her voice didn't waver until the prosecutor asked, "What did it cost you?" She hesitated, swallowed. "My peace, my dignity, my son." Almost Jason didn't look up from where he sat in the third row. His gaze stayed fixed on the floor, hands clenched between his knees. Next came Betty, armed with her triage nurse's clarity and 30 years of emergency room insight. The impact was consistent with a closed fist. Swelling developed along the zygomatic arch. The angle of the bruising showed force, not accident. If she'd fallen, the injury pattern would be different. This was targeted. The defense attorney's cross-examination of Tara was where the cracks widened. Under oath, Tara tried to maintain her poise, but Elena's line of questioning was precise. "You claim, Mrs. Whitfield fell, yet you posted on social media minutes later. She was unstable on her feet, yet medical records showed no alcohol in her system. And the hallway footage shows you entering after her, correct? I wasn't following her." "Is this your voice in the audio clip?" Tara hesitated. "Miss Whitfield, yes or no?" She blinked hard. "Yes." "And did you tell her to smile?" "Yes, but that wasn't—" "Thank you. No further questions." Elena clicked off the projector. It took the jury 2 hours. When they returned, the 4 persons spoke with no uncertainty. "On the charge of misdemeanor battery, we find the defendant guilty." The judge didn't pause. In addition to the existing violation, this court orders the defendant to pay full restitution for the medical costs incurred by the victim. Defendant is further sentenced to complete a 52-week certified batterer intervention program, report to probation, and comply with a 3-year no-contact order effective immediately. Tara's face remained frozen. No tears, just a clench of her jaw that looked less like shock and more like rage pressed under glass. Nora didn't celebrate. She only nodded once, the kind of nod that closes a door. Back home, the air tasted different, calmer, like the inside of a house where no one would throw a fist again. That night, after feeding her cat and locking the new deadbolt, Nora checked her email. One new message from Jason. Subject line: "We'll see what happens with your will. Body, you've made your choice. Don't be surprised when we make ours." She stared at it for a long time. Then she flagged it, printed it, and slid it into the binder labeled Trust Planning Contingency. The page fit perfectly. Nora sat in the notary's waiting room with her handbag zipped tight and her spine straighter than usual. Her hands were still, folded neatly in her lap, but her thoughts churned like surf in a storm, steady, relentless. The email from Jason echoed in her mind. "We'll see what happens with your will." He'd promised to fight, so she hired an army. Elena was already 2 steps ahead. That morning she'd met Nora at the office of Henry Valdez, an estate attorney with a reputation for anticipating trouble before it arrived on paper. "We make this ironclad," Elena said, placing Nora's thick documentation binder on the conference table like it was Exhibit A in a trial yet to be scheduled. "They want war. You give them structure." Henry nodded once, flipping to the first section. "Let's harden every corner." By noon, Nora had added a no-contest clause with clear forfeiture language. If Jason or Tara challenged the trust or tried to influence Ava too, every dollar they might have received vanished. Zero tolerance. Zero confusion. She also signed a dated notarized capacity declaration from her physician, already filed with Elena, verifying she was of sound mind and full cognitive function. The message was sharp and clear. No one could claim she was manipulated. "Add Betty as successor trustee," Nora said, her voice unwavering, "and a corporate backup. I don't want this falling apart if Betty can't act." Elena nodded approvingly. "That'll kill any claim of bias or mismanagement." They updated everything: house title, CDS, bank accounts, retirement designations. The trust was no longer just legal, it was fortified. No hinge left. Loose no clause left vague. In the letter of intent, Nora wrote in clean block script the reason behind every decision: the events, the violence, the lies, the betrayal that turned her own son into a passive accomplice. "For my safety, for Ava's future, for the truth," she ended it with one sentence: "I choose peace, not proximity." Henry slipped the letter into a fireproof folder. "Copies will be stored at my office, Elena's, and the bank's vault." The final signature left a faint indentation in her hand, but Nora barely noticed. For the first time in weeks, she exhaled without bracing. "Feels like armor," she murmured, eyes scanning the pages. "Because it is," Elena replied. "And no one breaks through it." That night, back in her kitchen, she filed the originals in her drawer with a smooth motion, no hesitation. Betty, seated across from her with chamomile tea in hand, raised an eyebrow. "Built yourself a bunker, huh?" "Built a blueprint," Nora said, "for how to never be cornered again." The doorbell rang, breaking the silence. She opened her front camera feed on her phone before even glancing toward the door. No one was standing there, just a courier envelope on the doormat. Betty rose. "Want me to grab it?" Nora nodded. Inside was a padded legal envelope stamped from a Los Angeles firm Nora didn't recognize. The cover letter was printed on cream stationery, too formal for sympathy and too slick for honesty. It was from Tara's civil attorney. Proposal for global peace. The letter was crisp with terms. Nora drops her civil claim, retracts her public statements, agrees to non-disparagement. In return, a mutual dismissal and a thin promise of closure. Betty read over her shoulder, then snorted. "They think you'll trade your truth for quiet." Nora picked up the letter, folded it once, then again. "I don't owe them my silence." And I won't buy peace at that price. She dropped the letter into the shredder beside the pantry, where it whispered its last whir, the teeth of the machine reducing it to confetti. And somewhere downtown, at that very moment, Elena emailed back 2 words on Nora's behalf. Offer declined. The settlement table was round, but nothing about the moment felt equal. Nora sat with her hands folded calmly, glasses low on her nose, the skin beneath one eye still faintly discolored. Across from her, Tara wore a stiff blazer and too much perfume, jaw clenched so hard it looked wired shut. Jason sat between them, shoulders hunched, looking like a child dragged to the principal's office. The mediator, an exhausted-looking woman with a clipboard and too many tabs, opened with the offer Nora had already shredded in spirit days ago. Tara's side wanted it all buried. No damages, no apology, no public record beyond what the court already required. Mutual peace, they'd called it. Elena didn't flinch. Here are our terms. She slid a printed list across. The table typed in bold. 1. Written, signed apology for physical assault and defamation. 2. Full restitution, every dollar awarded by the court. 3. Proof of completed 52-week batterer program. 4. Public retraction of her post stating Nora fell. 5. Permanent court-enforceable no-contact order, lifetime duration. Tara scoffed. You want me to go on Facebook and confess? No, Nora said, her voice flat. I want you to tell the truth. Something you've avoided long enough. Jason leaned in toward Tara, whispering sharply. Nora couldn't hear the words, but his desperation carried. His hands moved, pleading, begging her to bend. Tara stared straight ahead. I have a career, she muttered. You had a conviction, Elena corrected. Your HR department may find that relevant. The mediator coughed delicately. Shall we take a moment to caucus separately? Nora shook her head. We don't need more moments. We need honesty. The room went still. Tara's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. The mediator glanced between them, scribbled something on her pad, and then softly said, Then let the record reflect. Mediation failed. 12 minutes. That's how long it took for a legal attempt at peace to collapse under the weight of one woman's refusal to admit the harm she caused. Back in the parking garage, the wind off the coast curled into the concrete like a ghost, cool and salty. Nora stepped into the passenger side of Elena's car and sat in silence. She didn't cry, not yet, but she did later, alone in her kitchen. She stood by the sink, one hand on the counter, the other holding her phone. The message had come in just minutes after the failed mediation. Ava, I'm proud of you. I know everything they said. I know the truth. It was only one line, but it shook something loose inside her chest. The tears came quiet and fast, and she didn't wipe them away. When they stopped, she stood taller. Nora called Elena. Pursue the fees. Full amount. No more patience. Yes, Elena said simply. I already started the filing. The next morning brought a ripple she hadn't expected quite so soon. Betty knocked on the door, holding her iPad with the screen turned outward. You need to see this. On it was a forwarded email thread. A mutual acquaintance from the HOA forwarding a message circulating through Tara's professional network. The firm had been notified. Subject: Conviction status and required HR review. Tara Whitfield. Betty raised one eyebrow. Looks like someone's got a meeting. Nora said nothing. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just watched the words on the screen and let them settle like dust in her chest. Some truth she'd learned didn't need to be shouted. It just needed to be written. And now it was. Tara's HR meeting was supposed to be off the record. Private, quiet, but nothing about consequences ever stays hushed when people have built their lives on the sound of applause. The firm issued a brief internal memo by the end of the week. Employee suspended pending completion of court-ordered classes and full probation compliance. It wasn't plastered on any public wall, but it didn't need to be. A junior associate leaked the message, and screenshots traveled faster than strategy decks. In a matter of days, her name quietly disappeared from the Our People page on the company website. Jason's circles, meanwhile, thinned like smoke and wind. Group chats, once filled with birthday party photos and emoji reactions to brunch invites, now went silent. Nora noticed it first, not in what was said, but in what wasn't. He stopped texting altogether, and Nora let him. Instead, she turned her focus somewhere else, somewhere it counted. Inside the sunlit meeting room of the Long Beach Senior Advocacy Center, she sat among 6 other women and 1 older man, each with their own stories, bruises hidden or healed. She didn't speak right away. She listened. The instructor, a retired family court mediator, handed out booklets labeled Document, Defend, Decide. Nora flipped open to the first page and began underlining instinctively. She told them in time about the photo, the one in the bathroom with the lipstick smeared and the corner of her mouth swelling. How her voice had stayed steady in court, but her knees had locked until the bailiff asked if she needed a seat. She said it plainly, not for sympathy, just to file it aloud. Back home, Betty took over the project. Nora's living room became a quiet hive of documentation. Betty sorted manila folders by subject: medical, legal, surveillance, messages. You could start a museum, she said dryly, sticking color-coded tabs like tiny flags into the edge of a binder. But since we prefer justice, this'll do. When Elena called 3 weeks later, her tone was almost satisfied. The motion for attorney's fees came through. Judge awarded the full amount, plus interest. Nora exhaled. How long until it starts? Garnishment begins next pay cycle. First check hits in 10 days. The word restitution felt colder than she expected. Betty raised her glass of iced tea that night. To financial clarity and legal whiplash, Nora clinked her mug against it with a quiet smile. The next morning, the envelope arrived. Certified. White. Thick enough to hold several pages. No return address on the front, but she didn't need one. She knew Tara's handwriting, slanted and sharp. Every letter like a jab. She opened it with a letter opener, the metal cool against her palm, precise as a scalpel. Inside, 3 pages, typed, spaced like a legal memo. Tara's name signed at the bottom in blue ink. She didn't start with, "I'm sorry." She started with, "It was a hard year." Nora read the first paragraph, then the second. Nothing was owned, only explained, excused, rationalized. Stress, public pressure, miscommunication, emotional fatigue. She paused midway through page 2, set the letter down, and went to the kitchen. The kettle hissed before it clicked off. She poured water over the tea bag and let the silence steep with her. Then she returned to the letter. Read the rest. Nora slid the letter into a plastic sheet, clipped it into a binder labeled Civil File, Whitfield v. Whitfield, and moved on. Closure didn't need ceremony, only finality. By 10 a.m. the next morning, Nora sat across a long walnut table at her estate planner's office. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, warming the back of her neck. A notary waited at the far end, flipping through an embossed leather ledger. Betty sat beside her, silent but steady, a folded fan in her lap like a badge. The trust binder lay open in front of Nora, heavy with intent. Jason and Tara were now formally and irrevocably excluded. The no contest clause had teeth. If either of them tried to contest any part of her estate, directly or by proxy, they'd forfeit everything, including the dining set Jason once asked her to hold on to until the remodel. Even sentimental heirlooms were now protected under clause by clause language. Ava's name had its own page. Her education trust increased, structured with release stages, a portion at 18, more at 21, the rest if she graduated. No guardian needed to touch it. Nora had made sure of that. The health directive was next. In it, Nora appointed 2 people to make decisions for her in case she couldn't. Betty and Elena, not blood, not family, but trusted. Reliable, Jason had once said, Families should handle these things. He'd meant control, not care. Her signature came last, each pen stroke measured, not rushed. The notary stamped the documents with a crisp metallic click. One seal, two seals. A final initialed copy slid into a folder beside the trust packet. The banker confirmed. Retitling was complete. The house, her CDs, the joint account she'd quietly emptied and rebuilt, all tucked inside the trust like guarded treasure. They'd tried to storm her gates with pressure and guilt. She'd built a vault. Then came the part no one had asked her to do, but she had to. A letter to Ava. She typed it late that night. While the house was still, the curtains drawn. My darling Ava, I want you to know this wasn't about punishment. It was about safety. You saw more than a child should. You stayed quiet to keep peace. That wasn't your job. I've made choices I never thought I'd have to make. And I made them with love, not anger. When you open this trust someday, you'll see the legal reasons. But this is the real one. You're the one person in this family who saw the truth and didn't look away. She signed it with love that never needed applause, Grandma Nora, and sealed it in a blue envelope, slipping it between the trust binder's final pages. A week passed quietly, no calls, no new posts. The temperature of the drama seemed to cool until the knock came. Nora had just set her tea on the side table and folded her crossword puzzle when she heard a knock at the door. The knock came again, 3 soft raps, hesitant but steady. Through the peephole, Jason's face appeared under the porch light, older, unshaven, stripped of the charm he once weaponized. He didn't look up at the camera, just stared straight at the door, like it might open out of habit. Inside, Nora stood still, holding her breath. The hallway was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the wall clock. She didn't reach for the knob. "Mom?" His voice, muffled through the wood, wavered. "Can we just talk?" Nora let the silence stretch. On the side table sat a cream envelope, her response already printed and folded. "I'm not here to argue," Jason continued, barely audible. "I'm trying." Still, she didn't open the door. Some invitations weren't rejections, they were boundaries. She bent down, slid the envelope under the door. A crisp sheet of paper peeked out on his side, titled, "Reconnection Terms. Therapy, 6 months, verifiable." A handwritten apology, not for her files, but from his heart. And time, not days, not weeks, seasons. Jason's shoes didn't move for a long while. Then came the slow creak of the porch step, the soft crunch of gravel. No slamming, no muttering, just departure. She watched from the side window as he reached his car, stopped, and stood beside it for nearly a full minute. His shoulders rose, sank. Then he opened the door and left. No calls followed. Nora didn't cry. She just exhaled. Later that afternoon, she met Betty by the marina. The sky was feathered with cirrus clouds, and the air held that mix of ocean salt and distant grills. Nora walked slowly, her arms loose by her sides, the breeze brushing her cheek like a reminder she hadn't been touched in violence in months. "You okay?" Betty asked. "I am," Nora said, watching a pelican dive into the waves. "For real this time." Betty gave a knowing nod, her tote swinging against her leg. "Feels strange when the noise stops, doesn't it?" Nora nodded. "Like your ears keep listening anyway." They stopped at a wooden bench overlooking the water, gulls wheeling overhead. Betty reached into her bag, handed Nora a volunteer brochure from the Senior Advocacy Center. "They've got an opening on Tuesdays. Documentation workshop. You'd be terrifyingly perfect for it." Nora smiled. "I already emailed them." They sat in silence for a moment, both watching the boats rock against the docks, white sails bowing like quiet promises. When Nora returned home, her phone buzzed. A photo from Ava, her in front of a folding table, beaming, holding a science fair ribbon in one hand and a cardboard model of the solar system in the other. The caption read, "First place." for Grandma, who taught me how to orbit around nonsense. Nora stared at the photo, her chest warm. She set it as her lock screen, then placed the phone down next to her tea, steeping beside the trust binder and the envelope Jason had left unopened. Her email pinged. Subject: Civil judgment filed. From Long Beach County Court Clerk. Body: Notice of closure. Judgment satisfied. Attorney's fees awarded in full. She leaned back in her chair, folded her hands in her lap, and let the quiet fill the room, not as absence, but as peace earned. The past had knocked. She hadn't opened. And now the future stood still, hers to open on her terms. The photo wasn't graphic. No bruises, no blood, no flinch frozen in time. Just Nora, mid-step, rising from the pantry floor, one hand on the metal shelf, the other straightening the hem of her blouse, her mouth tight but curved upward. Controlled, measured, the kind of smile that came not from joy, but from resolve. She'd asked Elena to pull the still frame from the video. "Not the hit," she said, the moment I stood back up. Now it hung in a modest black frame beside the coat hooks by the door. Visitors didn't always notice it at first glance, but Nora always did. On her dining table sat 3 neat stacks. The final trust binder, its leather corners sharp and unbent. A folded brochure for the Senior Advocacy Center's volunteer program. An Ava's Science Fair ribbon, looped over a small glass vase, filled with lemon eucalyptus from the garden. Betty leaned over, squinting at the brochure. "You're actually doing the Tuesday workshops?" "I am," Nora said, placing a sticky note on the front page. "First session, bring examples." Betty shook her head with a crooked grin. "You weaponized paperwork." Nora chuckled softly, pressing the folder closed. "I weaponized the truth." "Paper just gave it armor," the kettle hissed. She poured hot water into their mugs, the scent of peppermint and honey curling, upward with the steam. Outside, the early evening cast the walls in golden light. Seagulls wheeled in the distance beyond the neighborhood rooftops. The calm wasn't loud or theatrical. It was the kind of quiet that took work to earn, like peace filed in duplicate and stamped by a notary. When Nora passed the hallway mirror on her way to place the mugs down, she paused. Her reflection caught the slant of light just right. The scar, faint, barely there now, ran along her right cheekbone. The swelling had long subsided, the tenderness gone, but the memory stayed housed just under the skin. A whisper rather than a scream. She didn't cover it with makeup anymore. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Ava lit the screen. "Dinner soon?" Nora typed back. "No hesitation?" "Always." Betty glanced at the exchange and raised her mug in a silent toast. Nora clinked hers in return. Later, as she walked the hallway alone, her fingers brushed against the frame on the wall. The photo stared back. Not a victim, not a moment of weakness. Just a woman who got back up and smiled. Not because someone told her to, but because no one could stop her. Her voice, when she said it aloud, was soft but certain. My son's wife punched me in the face and whispered, "Smile for the guests." So I smiled when the lawyer cut her out.